Welcome to Becoming Parents podcast. I'm your host, Jen Taylor Campbell. I'm a birth and bereavement doula, as well as an adoption and surrogacy doula. Doula means woman who serves. And although I love happy births, adoptions, and surrogacy, the pro bono part of my business is in bereavement. I'm here to help you. I'm also mom of 18 children, with over 30 years experience in the trenches as a mom myself. We have a huge blended family, and I've also experienced the loss of our adult son. Remember, give a shout out to those brave enough to share their stories on how they have become parents. Let's dive in. Welcome to Becoming Parents podcast. This is a super exciting episode with Mandy Lemond. Mandy, how are you?
Good morning, Jen. How are you? Thank you so much for having me. I love your energy. Like, I just want to hop in and hang with you for the rest of the day. Yeah, just
okay, we can do that. You have an accent that I think is cool. So there you go. You know, we can hang out. You have a really interesting story, like tragic, and I'm so excited at how forward you are in talking about this. I want to kind of start with you becoming a parent. And I know that through that journey, the reason why you decided to do things the way you did, we'll go back to your story. So let's start there, I think.
Sure. I became a parent when I was 27 years old, not by the means that we normally think that we would. But I found out early on that I could not have children. Infertility was major. My spouse at the time, we had dealt with some infertility. We knew we immediately wanted to have kids. So we were sitting at a ballpark one day during a charity event. Let me explain this though. My spouse and I at the time were both working at a TV station in Lexington, Kentucky, and we were doing a charity softball game for a foster care organization. And the cutest little green-eyed boy just walks up, and I was like, hey, playing with him. And they were calling him Mike. And they were playing with him. And the next thing I know, a social worker walked up to me and said, hey, you know, he's getting ready to his because of the quality of care that he's getting ready to go up for adoption. I got chills at that moment because there was an immediate connection between me and Michael. His name is Michael. We call him Michael. But I became a parent through an untraditional means of just becoming a foster parent, and they fast tracked us to get our classes done and helped us. And I want to say Michael chose us. We didn't choose him. He chose us.
Wow. Well, I love that because I've been involved in foster care for 15 years, and I just love that. And were you thinking of alternate ways of becoming a parent because of the infertility?
Yes, I think we probably all have. If you've been to that point where you realize, okay, the pregnancy test is not happening. So we thought about doing foster to adopt, but then I realized if that baby's going to go back, it wasn't going to happen. So we dead set and said, listen, we want to just do straight up adoption. We want someone to come in our home, and we had some specific things that we knew that we would not be able to take on. I think sometimes as moms or even as foster parents, we're like, okay, we can do the medically fragile, we can do all of those things. And I knew I was in journalism. I was a TV producer at the time. My spouse was in journalism, and we had a very active lifestyle. So we were very transparent about saying, okay, we are going to go through the state foster care system. And the reason why I did that, I think that's what you're alluding to, is I grew up in state foster care. Mm-hmm. My father brutally murdered my mother when I was 7 years old, and raped me and left me for dead. And no one wanted me. So if there's kids out there, trust me, there's an upside to the story. No one wanted me. So I spent 11 and a half, almost 12 years in a group home in Barberville, Kentucky. And I aged out of foster care. You hear that all the time, but I did. So foster care, that was the option for us. I think we kind of discussed maybe, going outside the country, but then when we got to the heart of things, my spouse at the time and I just were like, okay, we need to give back the way that someone gave to you.
Did you, I mean, that's like a bomb that you just dropped. Like, oh yeah, and my dad just, murdered my mom and brutally raped me, and I was 7.
Yeah.
So pause. What was the dynamic in the family leading up to that? And did you see your mom get murdered?
I did. I was there that night. I was there. It was June 21st, 1986. My father, and mother had an on again, off again relationship. I'm biracial. My mother was Caucasian. My father was African American. They had an on and off again relationship in the mountains of Eastern Kentucky. So you've seen Deliverance and all of those things. So kind of get that in your mind. So it was not necessarily liked upon relationship. So it was hidden, and therefore, I kind of was a byproduct of that. But I remember at times my mother she had a mental illness, and we were homeless quite a bit. My aunt, one cold night, I remember my aunt letting us sleep in her hallway because she didn't even want us coming into her house because we'd had some issues with finances and roaches and bugs. You know how it is. So I probably was always destined to go into foster care. But yes, my father broke into our home and stabbed me 13 times. I have another sibling, also stabbed her. But luckily she and I survived. My mother succumbed to her injuries. And the only reason why we survived is my sister happened to be able to escape we were in an apartment complex, and she escaped the apartment complex away from my father, not hers, but mine. My father and an off-duty police. I don't know why this always breaks my heart when I have to say it, because we don't respect enough. An off-duty police officer happened to be coming home, and he saved my life.
Don't you dare be sorry. Oh my gosh.
He saved my life, and it's always been a dream of mine to eventually meet this man. I know his name just from the articles that were in the newspapers about the murder, but he, thankful for him.
So he stabbed her, but she was able to crawl out?
So she literally, my sister so I'm 40. She was 11 years older than me. So she was quite bigger. So I was 7. I take that back. She was 16. She was 16.
16. Yeah. So, okay. So she was able to get out and find someone. 13 times you were stabbed. I mean, I'm trying to just wrap my mind around.
Yes. At 7 years old. Yeah.
There's that. Did he rape your older sister also?
No, he did not. Just me.
Interesting, because she wasn't his biological daughter, and she was older.
She was older, but she was on the couch, and he crawled through a second-story window. That story. This is what the newspaper says. Crawled through a second-story window where I was sleeping, and the only way that we were saved is she heard me screaming. Like my mother did. He told her, and it's in the court records too, that he told my mother, he's like, if you scream, I'll kill her. He was going to kill me. And then I woke up. I tell the story. I woke up because I thought I'd pottied on myself, because you're little, and I thought I'd pottied on myself, and it was actually my mother's blood that I was feeling. So
because you were sleeping together.
Yes, we were co-sleeping. We were sleeping together.
Oh my gosh.
She went. Then to her credit, that now that I'm older and I was a journalist, and I had to go back, and I had at his 25th, my father's 25th, and one of his renewal for his parole, I spoke. And at that time, I was able to also obtain, death certificates and see those things at that time. And my mother literally, we scream when we cut our fingers, to think and to her love. But you're a mom, you get it.
Yep, you too.
Thinking that my mom would just lay there and let someone, and then she was completely incapacitated, and then he did what he did, and then she was able, I don't know where she got this strength too, but there's a newspaper article where and I recall that she pushed me out on the stoop of the window, and the neighbor thought that it was raining because my blood and her blood was just falling down onto the car. And eventually, I started screaming, and my sister woke. She'd been laying on the couch watching Night Tracks, and she woke up and was able to get us help.
But he did attack her as well.
Oh yes. I think I don't want to diminish it. She was only stabbed like six times, I think.
Right. When you only stabs.
You know what? Everybody has their own trauma and their own hell. Everybody has their crap that they go through. So while this story seems so traumatic and so terrible to so many people, it is about a mother's love, and it also is just about how my mom's love for me and her protecting me turned into a good story when it comes to being able to adopt and help some lives. But at the same time, just like that, as a mother's love, my son that I adopted, Michael, he ended up breaking my heart, shall we say, but we've all dealt with that. So.
Yeah. And we'll dive into that, because I just know this much about that. When the police saved you, I can't believe you lived through this, and the trauma afterwards of like just being raped or just being stabbed would be horrifically traumatic for 7-year-old. I mean, I know that there are little girls who are raped that have to have reconstructive surgery. You must have had a lot of time in the hospital. Talk to me a little bit about that recovery and your fear. And then I do want to go into the group home, and I'm so angry that no one wanted, like, why wouldn't anybody want you in the home? Why? I know in foster care, because I've done it. And earlier you said something. You said, I knew that we couldn't take this type of situation. And in foster care, I think it's really hard for people. It's like when they're filling out the paperwork of what you want and what you don't want, like it's like picking out a puppy, right? It's so disconnected. And I always tell people, well, you need to, because you're going to have a child in your home that's not something that's a good fit. And that's terrible for you and the child. So you really need to decide what your limitations are. I said no more than I said yes. And that's a really hard thing because there's so many kids, but when it's not a good fit, it is not a good fit, and it's destructive for everyone. Other kids in the home, your marriage, like in a lot of ways. So when you have a heart for foster care, you also have to be able to step back and really more logically decide what you can handle. So I'm so glad you brought that up because it's a big part of it. So a lot of times people don't want someone who's been sexually abused. Your situation was so different though. It's not like you were trafficked or molested for years, or like this was a one-time incident, correct? Where it was a brutal rape in a stabbing. And I would think that that would be so much different than a child who acts out from consistent sexual abuse. So first, I know I'm throwing a lot at you. First, I'd like to know about like how you recovered. And then I want to try to understand why you ended up in, I guess, thank goodness for the group home because it was a place to go, but why that happened. So let's talk about your recovery first.
So I know just from the stories that my mother had a sister, and she's passed since then, but and I have a couple of cousins, but I know that I did die on the way to the hospital. And they brought me back. So I did die because I received a very serious puncture wound to my lungs, and it was feeling, and this is in the 80s, honey. This is no quick get in the hospital. We're navigating through the mountains of Eastern Kentucky. But I was in ICU for a month, and then the hospital another month and a half just to recover from that. And then even after that, I would, I had a lot of therapy that I had to do just to, you think about your lung capacity at that time, just for my lungs to heal. So I did a lot of, breathing, and still to this day, if it gets too hot, I mean, that impacts me. It really does. My boyfriend and I were in Sarasota this weekend and trying to run, and it was hot as Hades. And I'm like, okay, I gotta stop this. But there are some lingering effects. And as for the sexual abuse, that trauma of that's part of the reason why, after we got into the infertility and we started looking at the reasons why I could not have children, it was just such a traumatic experience, and sometimes it takes just that one thing that can cause you so much trauma that it took away my ability to be able to conceive a child naturally.
Oh, wow. That hurts.
It does. That happens to a lot of women, and we are afraid to, and I think doctors are also afraid to, and I have an amazing doctor. I think doctors sometimes are afraid to say, hey, okay, makes sense, this makes sense, this makes sense. Maybe your body is just still in trauma from that. And I think there needs to be major research about that for women who have been harmed sexually, to see the correlation between the infertility that happens with them. Because I had a doctor, I had a doctor who's like, listen, this is not mathematically making sense. Let's dive a little deeper. And she went and she asked, and I was like, yeah, I was raped when I was a child. And she's like, that's it. She said, there's more of a correlation to that than people realize.
Well, I would think so. And I'm glad that they're starting to put that together because holy crap, how could there not be? I just think about the size of a 7-year-old and the size of a man, and that does not make sense. Like, how could you survive that? How could you not need reconstructive? Like, our bodies are amazing. And also, um, what was that like moving forward sexually? Because I know I lost my virginity to rape, but I was 16, 15 or 16. You were 7. So what were relationships like for you moving forward after that?
I say this, and I know there's a lot of women listening to this, but I say this, hopefully this doesn't discount me from having a marriage eventually again. But I say this in my book, the book.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of sex. I'm not a huge fan of sex. And I have not had a lot of sexual partners. I was married for almost 20 years. And since then, I've been dating for someone for almost a year. And that's just about it. I mean, I've
Yeah.
just never been some, and I think when you've gone through something like what I have, and like any rape victim or trauma victim who's been sexually harmed, shall we say, you
Yeah.
have to have a partner who understands that that sometimes there's more to it than just the moment. There's things going through my head that may not necessarily be going through yours. And my ex-husband was an absolutely amazing person, so sweet about it. And the person I'm dating right now is very kind as well. I mean, at
You
44,
have to be.
yeah, you have to be. You have to. And if you don't have, and that would be a message I would preach to you. If you have been assaulted sexually and you have a partner who does not comprehend, or you haven't felt comfortable enough to have that conversation and say, okay, sometimes it's not just because I'm not in the mood, it's just because it's traumatic for me. You have to have those conversations.
I know for me, and I was older. I mean, right after the rape, I was like, what's the point in waiting? Because I had wanted to wait. I had wanted it. I mean, I think we all want that first time to be special, but I was like, well, that's gone. So what's the point? And I went through a succession of 7 people, which is often the time that what happens. And after that, I was like, holy cow, I took something destructive that happened to me and now I'm being destructive. So I had to really, my first year in college, I went to therapy and stuff like that. And I learned the opposite. I learned to love sex, and then had to get through the shame of, if you're molested and your first time is rape and then you love it, does that mean you love the fact that you were molested and raped? Like, I remember somebody asking me that and thinking, holy crap, how would you even equate those two things? Like, I had to get past it enough so that I could love it. But it's a mental thing, and you were so young. So wow. Okay.
The orphanage that I grew up in, I will give them credit for this, because I had a lot of folks who would pray for me and pray over me, and having there's a lady, her name was Mama Ruthie, and I was having a nightmare, and I went and sat, and she was just a big old lady and snuggly, and I was telling her, and she's like, she's like, Mandy, that person who hurt you did not take everything from you in that respect, because I had to, I grew up very religious, and I was saving myself for marriage, and that didn't happen. But I was like, so she's like, Mandy, that was his choice. When you choose to give that to someone, it's a different thing. So she always just made me feel like that, even though I wasn't technically a virgin, that because of the way that I could love myself and heal, then it was okay. And I can see that resonates with you. I don't think anybody's told you that. That wasn't your choice when you choose to do it.
No, that's how I got through it. That's how I got through it, is realizing that, well, it was the first time ever, but it's not the first time that I've chosen, or the first time with that person. And that's how I healed from that and stopped my own destructive behavior. So it resonates so much, because that little girl needed to know that. I needed to know that. I think all women that experience rape at any point need to understand that not having the choice and having it be a violent crime, not a sexual crime as much as a violent crime that happens to be sexual, like that, it really helps. And prayer helped me too. So I'm glad you brought that up, because, a lot of people struggle. Well, if there was a God, why did he let this happen? And that's not how God works at all. And so because there's a God, I could heal better. But
I think that just even that portion of the conversation that we're having, I always talk about I'm a motivational speaker as well as an author. And I talk to people about turning your mess into a message. And just
Yes.
as you and I have just had this discussion, there'll be, whether it's 1, 5, 50, 1,000, a million people who connect to just that small portion of this story and realize, I can heal from this just by you and I
Yep.
sharing that mess was able to help someone else. And I think that's, in my opinion, that's our purpose. Our higher purpose is to help other people. And sometimes we have so much trauma, but just like unjamming a coffee maker or coffee pot or whatever you learn from that lesson and you can teach someone else.
Yes. Yes, you become an expert. And even if it's an expert in something traumatic, if you have the ability to then I feel like you need to get outside of it enough, like not let it be who you are, just a part, like just something that happened to you. And when you get separated from it, you become an expert. You're an expert in it, and then you get to help someone else. So, yeah, I want to shout out your book. You mentioned that you're an author, and that's not available at the time. We are at July 11th when we're recording 2023. Is there a date of release?
Yes, we are hoping to have everything because it's been edited twice, but then we added something in. So I'm okay with that. You're an author. You understand.
Yeah.
So the release, we're hoping for a Christmas release. At least that's the target date right now. We're hoping for Christmas. And then the other book that I'm working on is A Perfect Divorce: How to Stay Sane When Your Ex Drives You Crazy. And that we're hoping to release that next spring into summer.
Okay. I want to make sure I'm adding that to our show notes to make sure that people know. So your Instagram is here and people can find you that way, and then they can find out about the book release. Because when I read your little notes, I was like, where is this book? I've got to get it. And I couldn't because it's not released yet. So there you go. So yay, you're an author. And then you are an Emmy Award-winning producer.
Yes, television producer.
Okay,
yes,
I want to tell me about that a little bit. I know we're like jumping the gun.
No, people, I think people like that. So my degrees, and I graduate only, you're a foster parent, only 2% of foster children graduate from college. 2% of statistics, 2%. So not only did I graduated on time. I have a degree in broadcast journalism. It's actually speech communications, but I was a television reporter and a television producer at a top 50 market right out of college. And I was thankful enough that I had an amazing executive producer, Kathy Stone, who saw that I had a talent for writing, and I produced the noon. And I reported for almost 3 years, and then I became a producer, and I did the noon and the 5. And my Emmy, I won for covering the horrific murder of firefighter Brenda Cowan. She was out to save a domestic violence victim, and he shot her. And unfortunately, we were rolling on at the time, and it was broadcast live. So that, yes, that day, I get chills telling the story. That day changed so much in television because we had an intern on the scene of a shooting. Like there were 3 or 4 people shot and 1 person killed. And then but we, back in this is, in the early 2000s, and we would just send the interns, hey, just because I had been an intern, roll on down there with them. And that changed the way the interns went. That changed the way, and honestly, it changed the response way that police respond to domestic violence situations. So now if you notice, you'll see a police officer show up before some, like a paramedic or someone else will show up, because Brenda, at the time, she was a firefighter / paramedic, and there were no police officers yet who'd arrived to the scene. And this person, it was, that day, that one day, Brenda Cowan, messed into a message that one day just changed so many things for people, and so many lives have been saved for her sacrifice. Her sacrifice changed because this guy, he was just out. He said he was out mentally ill, and he was seeing panther lions and whatnot. And his wife was able to call, and he shot her and crawled out. And then they were coming up, and he was just picking people off. But they were fighting because what paramedics go to the scene, used to go to the scene first, not after that.
Holy cow, man!
Oh, I was talking to one of my girlfriends, her name's Darcy, and her birthday was yesterday. And we were just sitting by the pool and talking. And she said, and she's in her 50s. And she said, I'm going to be honest. She calls me Queen. Everybody calls me Queen. She's honest. She said, I'm going to be honest, Queen. You've lived more lifetimes in like 44 years than most people do in 90. And I said, you know what? I think that's just, that was my plot in life. I was supposed to go through all this.
Yep. I agree. I mean, I think yes. So you unintentionally got into foster care and adopted Michael. And then what happened next? Because there are 3 kids total.
Yes, my stepson Gavin, who was
Okay.
a private adoption between my ex-husband and his wonderful mom Kim. She's an amazing mother, so she's a good person. So we had a really great family, and then we adopted Michael when he was 3 in 2007, 2006, 2007. I think it was finalized. Okay. And then fast forward 4 years later, we're sitting at a ballpark, and Ryan and I had been praying about possibly adopting another child, and our Josiah, who just turned 16 in February, happened to be sitting there, and he crawled up in my lap, and just this cute little bundle of joy. And I was like, "Where's your mom?" And he goes, "I don't know." And I'm like, "Oh no, there's a lost child curled up in my lap." And an elderly lady happened to be sitting down and heard him. They called him JoJo, and heard him talking. And she said, and my family was pretty well known. It's in foster care. We did a lot for,
I'm sure,
for the community. And she said, "You know what? He's a foster kid." And I was like, so I nudging the spouse, and the first thing they like to tell my person Ryan likes to tell is that Josiah's first request from him as his daddy was to take him to the bathroom. So he's like, and I looked at him. I looked at my spouse at the time. I was like, "Listen, this is our son," and he's like, "I know." And within 2 weeks, we call him Josiah. He was coming into our home, and then we adopted him. And then I thought I had the perfect life. I mean, I went from being completely homeless as a child at times and in an orphanage to owning a restaurant, 5 houses, driving a Mercedes. I've got a pool in the backyard. And just as sometimes it happens, my foster adopted son, Michael, got addicted to drugs and started selling drugs. And there was and even to this day, no one can understand why, which we never know why people do anything. But he became really addicted, started selling drugs. And one night he was high on drugs and opened fire on the wrong house. He was in a gang war. Mind you, he'd moved out of our house at the time, but he opened fire on the wrong house during a mess, to be honest with you, an Instagram mess. And but the bullets ended up hitting a then 5-year-old. And that 5-year-old was blinded, and it almost killed his mother as well.
So by wrong house, you mean like in this game?
Oh, he was intending to shoot someone. Michael, there's no question about that. Michael had the intent to go. He was in a beef online with a rival gang person, and the guy said, as they say in the hood, "Pull up." So he rolled up, but the guy gave him the wrong address on purpose.
Of course.
And yes, and so Michael, I mean, court records are court records. He opened fire on the house. It was 3 days before Christmas, about almost 3 years ago. It'll be 3 years this December. And he shot a child and almost killed him. So the gravity of that, sometimes us as parents, we're like, "Oh my gosh, you're not cleaning your room, you're not doing those things." So the gravity and the pain of me having known what it's like to be traumatized as a child that age, it took me right back, right back to those feelings. And I almost ended my own life because of the trauma that I dealt with. So my perfect family fell apart. I ended up almost jumping off a bridge here in Tampa, to be honest with you. And I call it God, call it angel, call it universe. Some man walked by me, and I was just standing there. I mean, I was constantly. Here's how sweet I truly am. I was waiting for the traffic to go by because I didn't want anyone to see me jump, because I didn't want to traumatize them. You know, can you imagine seeing that? And I just was waiting, and this man just walks up. I'm like, where'd you come from? And he just walks up, and he's like, "You know better than that. Don't do that." And I could literally, I'm getting chill. That story's never changed. The story's always going to be the same. And I just looked at him, and he's like, "No, go on. I'm not kidding you." Most kind, that's the thing I will always remember, in the most kind eyes. And I could have just been standing there looking, because it was a bridge. And I was like, Okay. And then I was so out of my mind, I couldn't even, I couldn't remember any. I didn't have a charger. I literally just left Kentucky, got on a plane. Of course, I flew first class. I didn't know to do that. Flew first class down here, had no money, had no credit cards because I thought people were like, my mind was not right. And the next thing I know, like my best friend Nicole back from Kentucky was able to get a hold of me, and like my phone, I charged my phone and able to get a hold of me. I told her where I was, and they got me home, and I got some help. And it's because people don't realize that the weight and the gravity of the things that our children do to us, yes, do to us. They got to take responsibility. How much it impacts us as parents.
Mm-hmm.
So,
oh, that one always hits home. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think we feel guilt and shame. We could have done better. What could we have done differently? We take this blame like it's our fault somehow that they made poor decisions. And like, maybe if I had done this when he was younger or supported more, but I mean, we make ourselves crazy thinking, how could we have done better so that then they didn't want to make this terrible decision? And it doesn't quite work that way.
No, it doesn't.
So this was
while I am religious, one of my pet peeves that I kept hearing during that first 6-8 months is, if you just taking him to church every weekend, if you just taking him to church, honestly, it turned me away from church because of that. I had so many people, what if you just, done this? I don't think that, God, not to be mean about, I don't think God's looking at me for the sins of someone else. I don't think that, and I don't think that, and
no,
it really just, I don't know. That just,
because look at you, like I grew up in dysfunction. You grew up in dysfunction and in foster care, and you didn't go that direction. And I know that you're a very low statistic, right? The college and all that, but still just the statistic of being a decent human being, regardless of how you grew up. Like, there is a point in our lives when you have to take responsibility for your decisions and not blame them on something that happened when you were a little kid or something that happened before. Or so that means I would be an abusive addict and molest kids because that's how I grew up. Like, well, of course people would be mortified. Oh, of course you wouldn't do that. Well, like, where's the line? Where's the line in taking responsibility for your own actions, regardless of how you were raised? So when you're a parent that loves your kids and chooses your kids and tries to do a great job, like you and I did, and look, we fail every day. We don't need help with that shame because we fail every day. We beat ourselves up enough as good parents. If you're not a good parent, you don't beat yourself up. You don't care. But for those of us who are parents who tried a lot and tried hard, our kids, when they hit a certain point, cannot use their upbringing to blame their adult actions. There's a point where you are responsible for yourself. So I call BS on that whole situation.
And I appreciate you saying that too, because just like your situation and my situation, there's so many of us moms. Let's bring it back to moms for just a second. I don't know, and no offense to the dads who might be listening to this, but I don't know where in the society we all of a sudden decided that the moms were only solely responsible. And I keep hearing this from my girlfriends, like solely responsible if your kid behaves badly. And I know sometimes dads, I don't want to say 100% that happens, but I do tend to see that, especially, in certain regions and cultures and whatnot, that's your child, it's my child when he's done something bad, and dad's kid and I think we do that often back and forth, that there just seems to be this narrative that the women have taken on their shoulders. And yeah, we are responsible, but it's equal footing. It's equal footing. And there's so many women, if I can say anything, y'all, it ain't always just your, you know what I mean?
Well,
I have my ex-husband's an amazing father, don't get me wrong, but I feel like that community outlook where women are just like, all of a sudden people are looking at you side eyes, and I'm like, well, there's two of us here.
There's two of you there raising, there's extended family, there's community, and I get it. It's, but we take that weight on too.
You do.
Yeah, it's my fault. It's my shame. It's my guilt. It's my failing. As moms, I think we feel that more acutely or differently. And you look, society's right there bashing us. So, and we're bashing each other. Let's not forget that.
Yes.
Okay. The orphanage seemed like, as somebody in foster care, and I'd love to get your take, if an orphanage were run well, And that's the caveat, right? I think it could be better than foster care, because foster care is a very messy system that's super imperfect, with people who, why they go through what they have to go through in order to be a foster parent, to then be a terrible foster parent. I will never understand. But I don't feel like an orphanage is a terrible thing in and of itself. It sounds terrible. You had one good experience in there that you shared with us. As a whole, how was that? Because aging out can be kind of like pat on the back, see you later. No matter what, foster care
Right.
group, it doesn't matter. So I want to like kind of wrap up your time in there and your drive to get your college degree, because super proud of you.
Thank you. My drive for that, and now I am going to cry, is there was a lady at the orphanage. She became the director, and I've been there so long. She just was like, and on the grounds of the orphanage, there were dorms and things of that nature. Her name is Carol Scott. We'll call her Mama Scott. She moved me in the house with her and raised me as her own. Love her to death. Raised me as her own child, and she, I have I call him my brother, Tommy. He retired lieutenant colonel, and I have an adopted sister. Well, I'm not adopted, but I say she's Renee, and she runs a daycare. But Carol, Mama Scott, she literally she's like, look, she calls me Amanda. She's like, Amanda, listen, now this is what we're going to do. In my junior year of high school, while everybody else is hanging out, there was a college there in Barberville. She sent me to Union College, and like, you're going to college, like this is what's happening. And she would sit and talk to us. There was myself and her biological daughter Renee, and then my other sister, my adopted, my friend Louise, who was there, who'd been there for a long time too. And this woman would take us to Red Lobster. You think of a group home, she would take us to Red Lobster. She'd take us on vacations. She showed me, my Mama Scott showed me what strength was. And she did give me some major advice that I'm so thankful for now as life has gone by. So she was the first person who I'd known who'd ever been divorced. And she was divorced twice. And she's like, listen, here's the thing. She'd call me baby girl. Listen, baby girl, here's the thing. Always make sure you got this. Always make sure. And she kind of just reminded me and set me up. And I don't think she was setting me up for failure, but she wanted me to be able to know that I needed to stand on my own feet at any point in time. She's like, never trust a man, never trust a man. And I do. I had a great marriage. I hate to say that, but she would always remind me that her rearing me, and she had a PhD, and I didn't see women like that back in the, I mean, this is the 80s and 90s, and this woman, has a PhD, and she also served in the ministry, and she just, I cannot sing her praises enough. Now there were some bad folks at the orphanage who did some crazy things at times, but my Mama Scott absolutely is the reason why I am the way I am.
Oh, it's so crazy. I mean, that's a situation that's more dramatic, right? It was my third grade teacher. And when I went back and found her, she didn't even remember who I was, which was even better. She was just a woman doing a job that she loved, being herself, and made such a significant difference in my life. It completely changed my trajectory. And like so often, people don't know, like we can't tell them, or we don't tell them what a significant difference they made in our lives. I'm lucky. You were able to do that. I was able to do that. But it only takes one person helping one person, which is my whole thing and your whole thing. Like, look, if one person reads this and it helps them, that has a compound interest effect that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So I want to finish. Eventually we have to finish, which sucks. I want to wrap up about the last 3 years. So when that happened with Michael, and he's in prison, obviously, and things fell apart, and how did you come back together? Because I know that feeds into your coaching and your books. Yeah. And I want to end on that happy note. So I want to hear about how everything fell apart briefly, and then how you kind of rose from those ashes.
So after the situation with Michael unfolded and continued to unfold, my spouse at the time and I, we stayed together for almost a year. And then it just got to the point where it just wasn't working. I mean, our family was destroyed. There was blame and inappropriate, you know what I mean? Like we were not good for each other at that moment. So we ended up, I ended up falling in love with the St. Pete area where my ex-mother and father-in-law lived down here. And I moved down here to be close to them because she's literally one of my favorite people on the planet. But then, dang it, she packed up and moved back up north. So I ended up down here by myself. But in the last 3 years, I think the biggest thing that should, if you take anything away from my life story, is that I found my purpose and my second wind when I started dating myself. I had never, I got a divorce and I would go on dates, and I found this, I moved here and knew no one. And I had this great girlfriend tribe, and I would put myself out there and I would meet people. And I think the thing that helped me heal, and I lost 130 pounds, by the way, too. I think that, yes, girl was thick. But I started eating better. I started journaling. I started practicing gratitude. Just the least, instead of waking up every morning and stepping my foot out of the bed and being like, oh my God, I don't want to get up. Thanks. I get to get up. I've got to, and I know that seems overwhelming and overjoyous, but it truly, truly has helped me. Changing my life with gratitude, taking it one day at a time, because sometimes we don't. It's okay. I say this to myself all the time, Amanda, it's okay not to know how it's going to end up. Be surprised. Enjoy the surprise. Because when some trauma happens to you, you want to control everything.
Yep.
And over the course of the last 3 years, I've been able to finish my book. I started modeling. I've done some television shows. Started modeling, which is really, really cool. Actually, I have a gig in Miami this weekend. And those are the things that I always wanted to do. I always wanted to be a model. I always wanted to be an actress. I've done some acting. I did an episode of Cheaters. But not about my spouse, obviously, but did an episode of Cheaters. They hired people. So I did that. I've gotten to do some things. And I'm off going to Miami Swim Week this weekend. So that's super, super cool. But all because I literally, you've seen that meme, take 6 months away, shut down your Facebook, shut down all that stuff. And I did. I stepped away from everything. And then when I came back, people were like, who is this? But I had to heal. I had to heal myself, because you can't keep putting little fires out. You can't do the little fires you're putting out. It's not getting you anywhere. It's like running a hamster wheel. Step out of the wheel, take a moment, calm down, like literally, right? And I believe in manifestation. I write my goals. Even my boyfriend, I keep talking about the boyfriend that I have now. I sat down one day and I was like, this is literally what I want. And by goodness, this man showed up.
Oh, wow. I love that.
When we were driving, we were we love to take little road trips. We were driving and I was like, hey, I'm going to read you something. And he's like, is that, you wrote that about me? And I'm like, no. I said, I kind of did write that about you. But I truly, once you know, people always say that once you know what you want, you can have it. But until you truly know who you are and know what you want, life's going to keep you in a hamster wheel.
Mandy, thank you so much for being on. What a fun time I've had. I would like to come down and hang out with you now. So.
Hey, girl, come on down the beach.
Thank you so much.
You are very welcome. You're very welcome. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.